Hello, friends. I want to talk a little bit about the idea of triggers today. I noticed that as we transition into the fall season, there's a lot of change and turnover, and maybe even approaching some family gatherings and time with friends that you haven't seen in a while. Things are starting to change with the leaves. And in my conversations with a lot of people, I've been noticing that people are getting triggered, and they might find that they're getting triggered by close family members, relatives, loved ones, good friends, and I think it's worthy of giving a little more attention to. So the immediate reaction might be to really label it as not a good thing. We don't like feeling that kind of aggravation of our experience where all of a sudden how we want to feel and what we have already labeled as feeling good gets shifted all of a sudden when we realize, something is not quite right. So our immediate reaction again might be to stuff that feeling down, move on, label and put blame on the other person. How dare they make me feel that way? Can't believe they're doing that. Or maybe you start to notice that voice starts to chatter, that kind of critical voice that I spoke of last time. Maybe it starts saying things like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you further along in your life right now? You still live at home? You're still single? This is where you're at in your career? And it might even compound. It might say, things are always going to be this way. You're probably going to be, like this the rest of your life. It's only going to get worse from here. That voice, whatever you've named it, whatever you experience, if you experience that voice, it has a lot of momentum if we let it continue cycling. And it's going to keep building until we figure out a different way to move through that. Because these triggers keep popping up. As long as we keep pushing them down, stuffing them away, and not feeling them, they'll keep coming up until we have shifted our experience and our perception of them. And we might even feel guilty that we even have that voice, adding an extra layer of suffering to this situation where we're feeling guilty and ashamed that, maybe we are feeling depressed. Maybe our health is pretty dismal. Do you hear that crow? Anyways, it's my favorite animal, so I had to pause. But I wanted to share a little bit about my experience with triggers, especially over the last couple of years when my health was not where I wanted it to be, and I was basically in survival mode, really just working on basic human acts of teaching my body to digest and have bowel movements again. Very humbling experience, and I noticed I would feel extremely jealous of healthy people. Say I was out with my husband getting groceries, even just seeing healthy women my age with what I thought were functioning bodies and a kind of fertility and health that I craved, I would immediately feel jealous of them and wonder what's wrong with me. And those stories would start to spiral, thinking, this is it, this is hopeless. My body is breaking down. I'm gonna die in the next couple of years. Life is useless, I'm useless. And just create layers upon layers of suffering. And I would just push that away and kind of get consumed in this negativity until I started to see that jealousy and get very, very curious. I needed to experience that to realize that, wow, I was putting so much of my value based on my physical form, forgetting that the lesson I could learn from this, and the lesson I did learn from this, was that I had so much value as a human being, regardless of what my physical body could or could not do. And that voice, I've labeled her Regina, that negative voice, wondering what was wrong with me, why I couldn't just heal faster, why I couldn't figure out these seemingly basic issues. That voice was there to protect me and show me that I had the opportunity to love myself, knowing that I was doing the best I possibly could at the time. So seeing these triggers as teachers opened up so much space for me to completely interact with my life on a level of curiosity and even playfulness. Now when Regina comes up and maybe she says something pretty nasty, I can almost smile at her and say, oh, thank you, still have some work to do in that department. And it's an opportunity to expand my thinking, the way I talk to myself, the way I can sort of play with these mental habits and shift to ones that are conducive to enjoying my life, and even just training my attention to focus on thought patterns that feel worthwhile of my time, because we all know that this time is short. So the longer we let Regina say these negative and kind of hurtful things, the more we're missing out on the opportunity to live our lives with joy. And these voices will come in cycles. They'll keep bringing their heads up as long as they know that they still have a hook in us. But if we can smile at them and bring that curiosity to them, it's almost like they lose their fuel. They step back and they say, okay. Maybe they'll transform. Maybe they'll come up in a different area of your life where all of a sudden you realize you're triggered by, maybe one of your best friends. And you have to stop for a second and ask, what can I learn from this experience? And even just thinking about the feelings of being triggered, it's a very kind of contracted, lower energy state. And I like to think of everything as interconnected. So bringing it back to the colon, if we're in that contracted state of hating ourselves, criticizing ourselves, judging someone else, thinking we know what someone else is doing because we see them a certain way, that contracted state, of course it's going to contract our colon and our energy centers of being able to metabolize and digest and take in nutrients and food and ideas. But when we relax and get curious about what our brain is doing, that opens up space to be flexible, adaptable, and see what the brain wants to do when it is in a more ideal metabolic place, to really choose and adapt and become this more fluid thinking apparatus. So my call to action today is to ask you, how can you learn from these triggers if we really start to see them as teachers, worthy of our attention and curiosity, and even, a little bit of kindness, in the words of Tara Brach, inviting them to stay for tea, getting really interested in what the message is behind this initial contraction, and to see, how can I soften here? What parts of me need to soften here? Where do I still have work to do? And the fun thing about this is that the more we start to embrace these as teachers, it's almost like our health starts to balance out too, because we are so interconnected with our thought patterns. We are sending signals of health and vitality or disease and destruction. And if we're going to think all of these thoughts, why not choose the ones that are going to send signals of repair? Why not? So again, what's holding you back? What in your life or in your thought patterns or in whatever this organ is doing throughout the day, what needs some tending? What needs some shifting? If you were to think about what would feel the most ideal for you, that ideal version of yourself, how you're feeling on a day where your body's feeling good, things just feel slightly more spacious. How can you step into that? And so when these triggers do arise, from that more flexible, more robust, non-judgmental, even loving standpoint, what happens when we can start to perceive the world through that? When these triggers start to lose their energy, what does that open up space for? So I'll leave you with that. As always, love to hear from people. This has just been coming up as I reflect on my past and who I used to be as a person when I was at my lowest point, and the changes I've made and what I've really found helpful in terms of healing some of these chronic symptoms that functional medicine and diet and supplements and IV injections and treatments couldn't touch because my foundation was off. So I invite you, if it feels like you've tried everything, to really start to bring your attention to things maybe you have been overlooking. They're so foundational, but might really move the needle and bring you to a place that you want to be.
Some scrub, Jay. We've got some planks, some learning, got some videos, some slippers.